Did I scare you? Sorry, I'm trying to be more exciting. Anyway, how's it going, guys? It's Nate here, and welcome back to another Elder Scrolls investigation. And let me just say, forget everything you know about Ulfric or Elisif the Fair. There's another monarch the people of this province should worry about. Indeed, Skyrim has a secret queen no one ever told us of. Well, kinda. You see, there's this mysterious, powerful female character known only as the Matriarch that we can read about in various notes scattered across the map. The letters suggest this Matriarch lady is leading a handful of bandit as well as forsworn tribes, and clearly using them to work towards some sort of goal that we'll talk about later. All things considered, she may very well be the third most powerful individual in all of Skyrim, behind General Tullius and Ulfric Stormcloak respectively. Now, despite making the Matriarch such an influential figure, Bethesda's writers clearly wanted there to be a lot of mystique and uncertainty behind her. Again, she's only mentioned in a couple of letters, and never brought up in any quests or dialogue. And the Matriarch's true identity is ultimately a secret. The Dragonborn doesn't ever meet her. Or do we? Spoiler alert, we do, and she's not a human. Not only that, well, since 2011, when Skyrim first came out, this character's been the subject of an interesting mystery and discussion. 9 years later, in 2020, the Elder Scrolls Online's most recent expansion has added some new information that answers some of the original questions we had about the Matriarch. Alas, ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to embark on a hunt for the truth, and take it upon ourselves to unravel what we'll soon discover is a more fascinating story than many of the game's actual quest lines. We'll start by going over absolutely everything there is to know in the Elder Scrolls V, and then we'll move on to see what ESO has to say, before we start drawing some conclusions. Anyway, without any further ado, let's do further and figure out who the heck the Matriarch really is. Alrighty, so beginning with the notes we can find. Remember, there's no real dialogue or quests that make mention of this Matriarch fellow, so these papers are all that there are to prove her existence. In total, there are 3 notes spread across Tamriel that reference this character. We'll start with the one located at Serpent's Bluff Redoubt, a small Forsworn encampment on Whiterun's eastern border. Here, inside one of the tents, lying atop a table, is the Forsworn letter. It reads as follows. Quote, "The Matriarch grows weary of your hesitation. Our people control the entire eastern slope of the Reach, all save Sunguard. Take it, and the invaders will be cut off from all retreat. But we must move now, while its defenses are still weak. Summon the tribes, do what you must, but if you do not act, she shall find someone who will." End quote. Huh, not many words on this paper, but they still say a lot. Immediately we can identify the Matriarch is some kind of leader amongst the Forsworn. Possibly the leader. And she's frustrated with one of her underlings who's not behaving as bold as she believes they need to be. This is already quite interesting, given what we know about the Forsworn and the mysterious nature of their leadership and history. You see, the Forsworn are a bandit-like faction of primitive people who live in camps across the Reach. They're like bandits in the sense that they attack and harass innocent civilians. However, they're uniquely brutal and savage. While a normal group of bandits may raid a village for loot and plunder, the Forsworn burn villages and commit crimes just for the pleasure it brings them and the terror it inflicts on the local populace. The Forsworn's origins date back thousands of years ago to the 4th century of the First Era. You see, at this point in time, the lands of the Reach were independent of Skyrim, and ruled by no king or empire at all. Instead, it was inhabited by an amalgamation of various autonomous clans and tribes that lived in its rolling hills and valleys. Sometime in the year 440 of the First Era, though, a famous High King of Skyrim, known as Olaf One-Eye, invaded and conquered the region, permanently making it a part of his kingdom. Well, Sort of. While Olaf had destroyed most of the Reach's tribes or forced them into obedience, some managed to survive and refused to submit. The remaining ones waged a guerrilla war and made masterful use of the mountainous local terrain to evade and outflank the large, conventional armies sent after them, and no king or jarl was ever able to successfully defeat these stubborn clans. Thus, over 4,000 years later, during the events of the Elder Scrolls V, the Reachmen are still resisting. We now call these people the Forsworn, as Forsworn literally means to have refused to give up. Now, what's so weird is that the letter we just read seems to imply this matriarch character is leading the Forsworn, and the other two notes, which we'll look at in just a second, also point towards the same conclusion. But if that is the case, then how come we've never heard of this matriarch lady before? The Forsworn have supposedly always been divided between a bunch of independent clans with their own leaders. How did this matriarch lady somehow unify all, or so many, of these distinct forces? And why doesn't anyone outside the Forsworn seem to know about her? Also, what the heck is she planning? Well, we'll answer all those questions soon. However, first, we should probably look at the other two letters. Conveniently, both are at Deepwood Redoubt, a massive Forsworn stronghold / former Nord ruin on the northern edges of the Reach. Deepwood Redoubt is seriously one of the most remarkable locations in the game, despite having literally no role in any notable quests. This place is home to the largest Forsworn encampment in the entire game by far. It's almost like its own Forsworn city. And because it's surrounded by mountains, the only way inside is by fighting your way through an underground cave system that's closely guarded. Nonetheless, in one tent here, beneath a dresser, we can find a note titled Forsworn Missive. It reads, quote, Alaric, do not presume we have grown fat and complacent here in the north. Our matriarch was wise to bring us here. Our camp is secure and our numbers grow. We will not skulk in the shadows with you, making petty plots with rabble and sycophants. When we strike, we will do it with cunning and power, and the occupiers will fall before us. That is the way of true Reachmen. End quote. The next letter is titled Forsworn Note, and it also lies in a tent. Its contents are eerily similar to the one we just read. Quote, Matriarch, we await your orders. Our blades are honed, our quivers full, our wills steeled for battle. The time of our waiting has ended. The time for battle is at hand. You have but to speak the word, and the occupiers shall fall like wheat before the reaper. End quote. Huh, okay. So both these final texts indicate the Forsworn at Deepwood were led here by the matriarch, and she's expected to give them an order to launch quite an attack sometime soon. We're done with letters now. That's it. Those three were all there were. And at this point you might be wondering, okay, well, what's next? I mentioned earlier in the video that we could actually meet this matriarch lady, and there was ESO related content. Well, there's something else here at Deepwood that's really gonna light up this investigation. Overlooking the city is a large ancient Nord temple, also occupied by the Forsworn, called Hagravens End. And when we enter it, we'll immediately be attacked by a number of human witches and a single Hagraven. This Hagraven has a particularly high amount of HP, more than double the average. All the witches can immediately be killed, but when you get the Hagraven to around half health, it'll suddenly disappear and teleport away. As you continue fighting through the dungeon, the Hagraven will reappear at various points and attack you before teleporting away a few more times after you've damaged it a good bit. Clearly, there's something special about this NPC, as no other Hagraven in the game teleports like this. Eventually, after making it to the top of the dungeon and reaching its outdoor porch, the bird will appear one final time, and can be defeated for reals in this instant. The game never explicitly confirms this, But it seems like this Hagraven was probably the matriarch that all of the notes were talking about. Forsworn and Hagravens have long been known to work together. They're commonly in each other's company at dungeons and camps. And there's even one book called A Life Barbaric and Brutal, which was written by a woman who was captured by a Forsworn clan that was led by a Hagraven. So, the idea that such a creature could be the matriarch in charge of all of the Forsworn, or a significant chunk of them, isn't far-fetched at all. Furthermore, who else could it have been? The letters state the matriarch led the Reachmen to Deepwood, and seem to indicate she's still here. So, who are our other suspects? It gets even weirder, as in Skyrim's game files, there's actually a unique, unused sound file that would have played somewhere in the Hag's End dungeon, called Hag's End Harp SLD. Take a listen to what this sound file sounds like. I can't stress enough, this sound file is very unique, and in fact seems to be the only place in the game where a harp instrument could have been heard, suggesting Bethesda put a bit of thought into it. Unfortunately, because it was left unused and is just a sound file with no discernible triggers, we're not exactly sure when it would have played or for how long it would have. It might have just played on loop in the background as additional music, or there might have been a specific moment when we heard it go off only once. We're unsure. Personally, I think all of the contextual information we've just gone over is already enough to convince me that the Hagraven we met here is the matriarch. However, there's one last thing I'd like to point out before we start discussing what exactly the matriarch was doing and what ESO has to say about everything. You see, there's this Dark Brotherhood quest called Breach Insecurity, in which the player has to assassinate a certain Penitus Oculatus agent because the Brotherhood told you to. Well, when you're given this mission, one assassin named Gabrielle tells us that she'll give us a special reward if we hide the person we kill's body and make him hard to discover.
To earn your bonus, do not kill Gaius Morrow in Dragonbridge or on the road. Kill him in one of the other major cities he'll be visiting. There, the body will be discovered quickly, as will the letter implicating Gaius Morrow in the plot to assassinate the Emperor. Do that, and Astrid has authorized me to grant you a rather unique bonus. It is a special token to be given to Olava the Feeble in Whiterun. Olava is an old and dear friend, and a powerful seer. The token entitles you to a reading of your future. It's an opportunity one should not pass up.
It's completely optional, and we don't necessarily have to do it. But if we do fulfill that portion of the mission and go back to Gabriella, she'll reward us with a unique token, and tell us to give it to an elderly woman named Olava the Feeble in Whiterun, whom she claims will be able to deliver us with a psychic reading. Essentially what's happening here is if we fulfilled that extra side objective and hid the body, we'll be rewarded with the ability to see a psychic. When we go to Olava and show her the token, she'll say this.
And you are not alone. There are others. A child of night. A stalker of the sands. Oh, but before you are family. There will be blood. Such blood. Wait, there's something else. A potential for adventure and wealth. It is a ruin, ripe for the plunder. Deepwood Redoubt, far to the northwest. Through there is Hag's End, the last resting place of an assassin of old. A dark brother who bequeaths his ancient earthly possessions to you.
Yeah, obviously it's the last part of her statement that interests us, because after she tells us all of that, we'll be given an objective marker to go visit Hag's End in Deepwood Redoubt. Yeah, I know earlier I said the location wasn't associated with any quests at all, and I guess I lied. This minor quest is affiliated with the location. But anyway, when we visit Hag's End with Olava's quest active, we'll find a small little closet-like room opened that normally isn't, with the body of a dead Dark Brotherhood assassin inside, whose armor we can loot. There will also be a nearby chest with some random leveled loot inside as well. After locating this corpse, the quest completely ends, and there's literally nothing more for us to do. But one theory is that maybe this assassin is found in Hag's End because he was originally sent here to assassinate the matriarch, but failed in his objective and was caught somehow. The assassin is referred to as the Dark Brotherhood Assassin of Old, and Olava even refers to him as an ancient assassin a couple of times, which implies he must have came here long ago. However, his corpse isn't decomposed at all, which would suggest that he recently passed away, so we can't be sure on the dates. Nonetheless, it's just one more thing to consider. Now, all of this evidence aside, we still have no idea what exactly this matriarch's plans are, or just how powerful she is. I mean, we don't know if she's in charge of all of the Forsworn, or just certain groups of them. And this is where ESO finally comes in. You see, on that great porch of Hag's End where we finally faced off against and permanently got to defeat the matriarch Hagraven, there was a small altar with a dead woman lying atop of it. No doubt some sort of human sacrifice to the witch's dark gods. However, next to the body is also a unique steel dagger called Bloodthorn, which has a unique enchantment that allows it to soul trap any enemies that die within 3 seconds of being hit by it. Now, this unique weapon may not seem like much, and for a while it seemed like an ordinary dungeon reward with no significance. But when ESO released in 2014, we were able to meet a new clan of Reachmen, called the Bloodthorn Cult, who inhabited far western High Rock. The Bloodthorn Cult was particularly renowned for their strong proficiency with magic compared to the other Reach tribes, and they had loads of Hagravens and witches within their ranks. To me, it seems like by including the Bloodthorn dagger at Hag's End, Bethesda may have been implying that the tribe in this location and the matriarch were members of, or at very least affiliated with, the old Bloodthorn cult themselves. Now, you might be thinking, oh, maybe it's just a coincidence, Nate. Well, no. We can actually get the very same Bloodthorn dagger as a quest reward for completing one of the Bloodthorn cult's quests in ESO.
Hail.
You return. What did you learn of the Bloodthorn plans? The fools! Did they succeed? The dangers that face us become clearer. I will try to convince Chief Tazgol of this, though I doubt he will accept the word of an outsider. Your efforts on our behalf bring you honor.
Now, the issue is that ESO took place around 1,000 years prior to the events of Skyrim, and the Bloodthorn cult wasn't actually in the Reach, but in far western High Rock. And in that game, we may have gotten to destroy them too. You see, the big problem with the Bloodthorn cult in ESO was that they were creating a lot of werewolves and lycanthropes, and trying to overthrow the regional government. We ultimately defeated their leader and cleared out their headquarters. However, never completely destroyed them. Here's what I think. Remember how one of those notes in Deepwood Vale specifically said the matriarch led the Forsworn here? I think this Forsworn group in the matriarch came from High Rock, and were in some way associated with the Bloodthorn cult before they arrived. Perhaps they're actual members of the organization, or some sort of splinter group of them. Nonetheless, a connection seems obvious. I think this is a pretty solid theory that all of the evidence substantiates. But there's one problem. In ESO, there was already a different group of Reachmen at Deepwood Vale. Back in May of this year, 2020, the Elder Scrolls Online got a new expansion that unlocked the northwestern region of Skyrim, specifically the holds of Hothingar, Hjolmarch, and the northern sliver of the Reach. It wasn't anywhere close to all of Skyrim or anything, just a chunk of its northwestern region. But within this chunk of new land we could visit again was the Deepwood Vale from Skyrim. And believe it or not, it was still populated by Forsworn and witches. The problem is that the witches and Reachmen in Deepwood Vale in ESO aren't a part of the Bloodthorn cult, but instead a coven of witches called the Icereach Coven. The Icereach Coven is, well, again, a coven of witches and Reachmen operating in Skyrim around 1,000 years ago. In ESO, we'd find out these guys were responsible for creating massive, giant red storms called Storms that were terrorizing the Sea of Ghosts and province of Skyrim. The Icereach Coven was also a part of something called the Grey Host. The Grey Host is Western Skyrim's primary antagonist. It's not really a single faction, but an alliance of all sorts of dark and evil independent factions, who were teaming up to try and take over the world. These include the Icereach Coven, other witch covens, multiple werewolf packs, some vampire clans, a whole shebang of dark forces basically. Now, sadly, and I've talked about this before on my channel, we're not really sure what happened to the Grey Host, or the Icereach Coven for that matter, in ESO. You see, the way the Western Skyrim ESO expansion works is that over the entire year of 2020, its main quest line slowly gets more and more added onto it, and more quests are released which reveal more and more of the story. Because the year's not over yet, though, we don't really know how everything ends, and the exact fate of the Grey Host and the Icereach Coven remain a mystery. We did, however, definitely get to clear out the Icereach from Deepwood Vale and kill all of their members in this location. So, unless ESO unveils some sort of plot twist or there's some sort of further development, it seems like they were all gone by the end of the expansion. Which of course provided the opening for the Matriarch and her potentially Bloodthorn cult-affiliated Forsworn to move in during the events of Skyrim. So the timelines still seem to add up, so long as ESO doesn't throw us any more curveballs. All that said though, even if we assume the Matriarch was affiliated with the Bloodthorns, how did she come into power over all these Forsworn tribes in the Reach? Well, that is something ESO doesn't provide us any answers with. At least, not yet anyway. I'd bet she's not in control over all of the Forsworn, but instead, just her tribe and maybe a couple other loyal tribes. There are still probably Forsworn in the area that don't recognize her. Some of you may recall, in Markarth's prison of Sidna Mine, there's a character we can meet named Madanak, who calls himself the King of all Forsworn. And we can complete a small quest where he allows us to quote-unquote join the Forsworn, and we can help him escape his prison and get back to his clan. But after we do that, it becomes blatantly obvious that Madanak's not actually the king of all Forsworn, just his small group of Forsworn. So I suspect the Matriarch may be in a similar position. She leads her clan and a couple more, but she's not necessarily in charge of all of the Forsworn, if you catch my meaning. Either way though, this would still make her one of the most powerful characters in the entire game, leading the largest force behind the Stormcloaks and Imperial Army respectively. And that is definitely something to brag about. Anyway, on that note we are going to wrap up. Thanks so much for stopping by, everybody. What do you think was going on with the Matriarch? Do you think she descends from the Bloodthorn cult and is leading a few separate clans together? Or maybe do you believe that she's in charge of all of the Forsworn? Or heck, maybe do you think the Matriarch wasn't even this Hagraven to begin with, that we got it all wrong? Leave a comment down below. As always, like ratings are very much appreciated. Again, thanks for watching, and hope to catch you all in my next video. Peace out, everyone.